everyone to the Too Long to Listen podcast. I'm Senda, your host, and today I have a special guest. Rahul, welcome to the podcast.
Senta, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. I did prepare a short intro that I'm going to read, full disclosure, and then obviously I'd love for you to let me know if I'm forgetting anything, but these are the highlights that I get. So, Rahul is my guest for today. He's done product marketing at some of the most interesting media companies of the last decade: BuzzFeed, Frame.io, TikTok, and now Tubi, where he's director of product and partner marketing. He was named to Ad Age's 40 Under 40 in 2025 for pushing Tubi's ad innovation forward. He is deeply opinionated about marketing, and this is why I think this episode is going to be full of insights. So welcome again. Did I miss anything?
Thank you. No, I think you nailed it.
Okay, cool. I've done my research. So I think the first question I have for you is, obviously you've worked in product marketing with so many cool brands. Like, I'm super impressed. I'd love to know from your point of view how product marketing has differed and what your opinion of what it is today is, basically.
Yeah, product marketing is such a hard thing to actually define. For me, the thread that ties all of my experiences together is that intersection between media and tech and advertising. Each of my roles have kind of sat at some of that intersection. What's been really fun for me is that everywhere I've been the first or second product marketer within that team or department or that side of the business. And so I've gotten to spend a lot of time building functions from the ground up and really understanding the kind of ins and outs of how these product marketing structures are built and what the function can and should do. So BuzzFeed and TikTok were way more about marketing the content, productizing culture and virality, thinking about native and interactive ad formats that didn't feel like advertising, but got brands to really rethink what good content could look like at scale. Frame.io and Tome were both way more product-led, deeply technically ingrained in the roadmap. That's more about productizing workflows, making complex creative processes more simple and more intuitive for people overall. And those were both, more product-led and less entertainment-driven roles. And then Tubi has been the convergence of all of it for me. Ultimately, I've been able to rethink here how advertising works inside of a streaming experience. So not just running the same interruptive ads that we're used to seeing on TV or that everyone else runs, but bringing new ways of advertising into the fold, thinking also about how to bring those creative and content workflows together and how we can build internal and external tools for advertisers, creators, and viewers alike. One thing that I know is painfully obvious for all of us product marketers is that it looks wildly different at every company. But what I think has been consistent across all of my experiences are a couple of things. One, it's a deeply, deeply strategic function, not just a support function. Support and sales enablement and marketing enablement are obviously pieces of the product marketing puzzle, but product marketing shapes the go-to-market ultimately. We're not just there to execute it. We're not just that last mile function. I think the second thing is that we're a bridge. We're the bridge between what we're building and why people should care. We're the bridge between the inside of the company, the outside of the company, the technical side of the team, the business side of the team, the creative side of the team. So we really play that almost like Google Translate role or translator role between different entities that we're working with. And I think the third piece, the biggest constant is that customer obsession. Having the pulse on the market, knowing who your users are, what they care about, and then acting like that connective tissue between the people who are using your product and the people building it. So long story short, my shorthand for how I talk about product marketing is ultimately it's about getting the right products to the right people at the right time with the right message.
Well, I think that's the best definition of all times. Like, especially the timing component, and it goes back to everything you just talked about, and essentially the being in tune with your market and your customers and understanding their needs. And so I'm very curious to know, at Tubi, how is that all coming together. If you can also take us through how you're structuring your team, and what are the core initiatives that you've identified are the most impactful for product marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're really small and scrappy at Tubi, and I think that's where we get to do some really, really fun work. There's a lot of ownership. It's very deliberate. It forces prioritization, and it keeps us really close to the work overall. So we're deeply, deeply focused on a couple of key areas. Obviously, the advertiser experience being one of them. What do ads look like on Tubi? How do viewers interact with them? What's the intersection of those two things? We're thinking a lot about creators at Tubi as well. Today's creators are tomorrow's writers, producers, editors, showrunners. They're the today's celebrities and tomorrow's production experts. And so we're thinking a lot about how to bring creators into the fold on a more premium streaming environment versus a social environment. And how brands can tap into that. I think the unique opportunities there are endless, especially because of the way that creators have, from the beginning of their kind of existence, quote unquote, have worked with brands and know their audiences and built their audiences and know how to speak to those people. So there's, I think, a really amazing opportunity there. I think another thing that's really unique about Tubi is that compared to other streaming platforms, we're 100% free and 100% ad supported, which means that every single viewer on the platform has the same experience. They're seeing the same thing. There aren't different models or plans or tiers that create different experiences for viewers. So in that sense, the viewer experience and the ad experience are the exact same thing. Those user journeys are the same. And so we bring those two together, whether formally or informally, and ultimately everyone at the company, product marketing especially, are thinking about how those two things play together, and then how we can bring them across in different channels.
So that's interesting because you're talking mostly about the product experience, and obviously how that. So it sounds like your team focuses mostly on what happens through the product. So I'm very curious to know whether you work closely with brand or growth, or how those other functions kind of collaborate. Because just to give you an example of how we do things at Vibe, we're pretty much bringing brand and product together. So brand and product marketing, essentially our brand is our product, and it's almost like things get pretty well coordinated. So anytime there's a new messaging that we're pushing, we know that we can run an out of home campaign or run social ads as well. So everything is in line. I'm just very curious to hear whether it's similar or different at Tubi.
Yeah, I think going back to the connective tissue idea, we collaborate really closely with all other orgs across marketing, product, sales, etc. We report into marketing at Tubi, which I think is a really unique place for us to be here. I really like it, in particular because we get to sit right in between the sales org and the tech org, and basically play the bridge between the two of those. We're not compartmentalized by any one of those, but kind of get to be the people that bring the compromise, the solution to the table, and not be tied to any of those two in particular. The way that we interact with other groups. So, and you mentioned that that you're focused a lot on, the brand and the product being the same. And I think especially at tech forward companies, that's very true, right? What you're marketing is not just a brand or just a physical product, but it entails the actual tech piece in it. And so they're really tied closely together. So the way I see it, brand is really like the why of it all, the emotional story, the look and feel, the identity, how that thing really makes you like resonate emotionally with the brand and the product. Product marketing is then the how. So the value proposition, what we're bringing to the table, why it matters, the feedback loop between the market and our users and the product, activation plans for new launches, and the kind of, like the how behind all of it. Growth comes into play as like the pipes, right? They're owning acquisition, retention mechanics. They're thinking about CRM. They're thinking about all of the pieces that that maintain the user journey and supercharge it. And then content marketing is the megaphone. They're owning amplification. They're owning distribution across a bunch of channels. They're figuring out how to take that core why, how, how to leverage the pipes and what we should be saying across each of those things to each of those audiences. And so, um, one thing that I'll say about Tubi that is just such an amazing environment is that here it's very high context, high trust, low ego. And so we also understand that the company and the org structure and the way that we have to move is going to change over time. And so it's really easy for us to have conversations about clean ownership lanes, who needs to do what, how do we make this happen, and that I think sets up a really clear structure for accountability too.
Oh my god, that is key. Actually, there's like two big questions I have for you. So one is around like how do you make sure people are accountable in your team, especially in marketing when, and I've seen this mostly maybe in startups where marketers can do so many different things and there's this sense of urgency all the time that you feel like you're accountable for everything. So there's this, and then there's also the accountability component and the prioritization component. So how do you make sure your team is working on the right projects, and how do you, I guess essentially how do you empower them to feel accountable for the right projects? I'm very curious to hear how you make that happen.
This is a great question. It's something that I actually like spend a lot of time thinking about, is prioritization and what do we focus on and how do we balance the kind of uh, you know reactive ish work of maintaining the status quo and the proactive work of thinking about the future. And those are kinds of conversations that I'm engaging in, every day. Um, at Tubi, we have two North Star metrics that we're all accountable to, viewership and revenue. And those two also go hand in hand because of our ad supported 100% free model. So everything that we do has to move one or both or show potential of moving one or both. I think Tubi also does a really great job of having metrics owned somewhat collaboratively. Across product and sales, marketing, et cetera. I think it's really hard to have one single team claim full credit or ownership over one of those North Star metrics. And I think if you pretend that one team can own that, that creates a really bad incentive structure. And so I've seen other environments where the product team is solely tied to revenue, and that's the only thing that they care about. They don't care about brand metrics. They don't care about viewership. They don't care about anything else. The monetization product team is responsible for solely revenue. And so when it comes to their priorities, that's all they're thinking about. Here, what I do with my team on a weekly basis is we're looking over key work streams, and we use the P0, P1, P2 setup where P0s are the things that we need to deliver immediately. They're going to drive big impact for the company. They're going to move the needle in a significant manner. They're more directly tied to one of those two, key metrics that we're looking at. P1s are the things that are a little bit more of that like longer term play, right? What are things that we're working on week over week that are not necessarily immediate needle movers, but things that are going to help us build infrastructure, help us build foundations, help us educate, and thinking about those kinds of work streams. And then P2s are what I kind of call like side quests. And I think those are really important too. I think it's really fun to have that kind of side quest. And yes, like lots of things need to be tied to a specific metric, but there are also sometimes projects that come off better when you can do a quick one-off for somebody and build a relationship or help bring value to them in that moment, or work on something that is like a little bit fun and experimental and can turn into like a big idea in the future.
Again, just out of curiosity, I'd love to understand how all these initiatives, or the way you structure the priorities, all these initiatives ultimately have to move the needle between viewership or revenue. Is that correct? So you make sure that whatever is going on your team is driving those two metrics. And so could you potentially share any examples of like the initiatives that you've identified as the most impactful and the ones that maybe are not P0 but will drive much more impact?
Yeah, great question. So one example of how we brought something that was going to help move viewership and revenue. Lots of times those things can be a trade-off, but there are things that we push for. So one example is We delivered a series, designed and delivered a series of homepage ad formats on Tubi. We have the Tubi wrapper, which is the first thing you see when you open up the home screen. That's primarily designed for studios and entertainment brands, and it's a full screen background takeover of Tubi. We also have the carousel and spotlight, which are half screen units across Tubi, with really fun, unique creative that our creative studio works with brands to build. But underneath those pieces is a sponsored container of content, a sponsored row, that is related back to that ad. And so in that moment, what we thought about was how to bridge the gap between the job to be done for the viewer, which is to discover content, and the job to be done for the advertiser, which is to help discover a brand or a new product. And so pairing those two things together, having an ad format that's not just a floating bar or floating display unit, but is anchored to a content discovery experience that's related back to that brand, helps people find really unique content and tie that back to the advertiser itself. And so when you're seeing multiple touch points throughout, that spotlight unit itself, the billboard and pre-roll at the beginning, and then having pause ads throughout, you're creating a multi-touch experience throughout that viewer journey. So like that's a great example of a P0 that we delivered. I think some of those P1s are things like continuous sales education, market education, thinking about how we're regularly bringing new insights and case studies to the table. So internal education is one of those pieces that's sometimes really hard to immediately tie back to like a revenue metric or a viewership metric, but they're the kinds of things that really matter ultimately in the long run in getting your sales team out there and being able to speak really effectively to the products, take the strategy to market and deliver it in a way that makes the buyer, the client, the advertiser, the viewer, whoever you're talking to on the other end, feel that connection back to Tubi and feel that, like we're building something cool here. This is why you should be a part of it.
Well, I really like this example you shared. It's so empowering when you work on something that moves the needle on the most like two important metrics of your company. So the fact that you guys identified that and were able to deliver on it is really cool. So congrats, by the way.
Thank you. I feel really lucky. It's such an incredible team. I can't tell you how much fun we had building all those formats out.
Well, then I'm very curious to hear from you because you've worked with so many product marketers. I'm sure today you have an opinion on like one thing all product marketers do that they probably shouldn't be doing, like something that you could probably just stop doing to focus on something else.
Yeah, yes. Competitive work and competitive intelligence is really important. But one thing that I think is really less impactful in that world are the massive feature comparison matrices that we make. I've made several of them. My team's made several. Like, they always end up being like way too detailed, having a lot of information in there. They're really time consuming to build. At the same time that there's all of that detail, they also lack depth. And so it's really hard to go way deep into how something works and why it matters. And then they also like go stale almost immediately, right? Anytime someone releases a new feature, that table is useless. And so I think the other thing that those do is it also puts you in a feature by feature comparison state instead of a differentiation state. So instead of do we have this feature, it's are we solving this problem and are we doing it better? So one thing we talk about a lot at Tubi is building with our advertising partners instead of building for them. And there's a world in which you can go to advertisers and say, what do you want us to build? And they'll tell us, I want a list of X, Y, and Z. We like to go to them and ask, what are your biggest challenges? And we take those back and we figure out how we can solve those challenges in a way that's uniquely Tubi, that's uniquely built for that advertiser, for that category, and something that can deliver impact for them over time. So, it's ultimately people aren't buying features, they're buying solutions to their problems. And so when you think about the competitive landscape at a broader level, instead of at a feature by feature comparison matrix in a Google sheet, I think you get a much clearer sense of what you're looking at.
Oh my God, especially if it lives in a Google Sheet.
Especially if it lives in a Google Sheet.
We really don't want to see that. No, but this is such an interesting point. I'm so happy you brought this up because only like a few weeks ago, I think I was talking to our CEO about this, where we built our new sales deck, and we had this slide where it showed like the classic table of like the little matrix, and we were just saying, actually, let's just kill this slide. It doesn't make any sense. It's
Yeah.
almost like downgrading the product if you compare like, especially the feature by feature analysis. It's almost like you're saying, yes, we deliver the same thing, but we're better on one out of three. Whereas what you should be saying is telling the story of your, like, how you differentiate in the category. So what do you recommend, or what are you guys doing instead of that? Like, is it what you described in terms of like a solution per comparison rather than, yeah, how do you deliver on that?
Yeah, it goes back to exactly what I was saying earlier, that solutions framework, going back to the jobs to be done as well. It's a really, really fun framework that I like a lot, is that jobs to be done thing. That came out from my time back at BuzzFeed, actually. And so one thing that Jonah Peretti spent a lot of time doing was talking about this jobs to be done framework, which came from Tony Ulwick, I believe his name is. Jonah Peretti, of course, is the CEO of BuzzFeed. But he applied this jobs to be done framework across our entire content strategy. So whether it was a quiz, a list, a long form article, a video, each of them had to be tied back to some kind of a job to be done for the person consuming that content. Is it to make them happy? Is it to go, oh, I resonate with that? Is it to say, this reminds me of somebody, I want to share it with them? This is teaching me something new. And so it anchored it in that job to be done, instead of looking at like, well, we can do a like Mad Lib style exercise of, here are 13 things that make you go X, Y, and Z, right? Like, yes, that is a content framework, but that framework serves a job to be done for the
Yeah,
user at the end of the day. And so when we lean into that and thinking about what job do we need to do for the advertiser, what job does that ad product also need to do for the viewer, and how do those things connect together, I think is a much more effective way to think about the competitive landscape. And so sure, there are other competitors who have a style of interactive ads out there, and at Tubi we might be thinking about that in a different manner, because we are seeing viewership behavior lean into a certain way. You'll have to stay tuned for more on that one. I can't reveal it all yet, but leaning into it in a little bit of a different way that makes us think about interactivity in a different job to be done than just, great, I can pick up a remote and click a button.
would you say that the jobs to be done framework is similar to what we call like use cases, or focusing on what you can achieve versus I'm using this feature to do XYZ?
Yeah, I think so. I think the two tie really closely together. That's a great question. I think a good use case will also have a job to be done
Right.
within the actual definition of that use case. But sometimes you just see a use case that's not that clear. It's like, oh, well, I am an XYZ. I'm a product manager who needs to accomplish this task, or I'm an advertiser and I just need to get views. That's a use case, but what is the actual job to be done? Why are you looking as an advertiser to get views?
Right.
And that's where you can push further into that.
Okay.
But yeah, I agree. I think they're very, very, very closely tied together.
I mean, look, as you know, product marketers love their frameworks, so I'm very happy to know that.
Yes,
So thank you.
of
Okay,
course.
I have one last question for you, Rahul, and this is more like let's say an aspirational question. Like, what would you advise future PMMs to focus on to really kind of stand out in their career, especially with all the tools that are taking over PMM skills and everything else?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's your recommendation?
Uh, Relationships. At the end of the day, relationships matter so much. It's what I think makes us tick as product marketers. Our understanding of the world around us, our understanding of our customer, our understanding of our stakeholder comes not from a document, not from what AI can tell you, not from doing a Google search and pulling bullet points of what people are saying, but it tangibly comes through when you have relationships with people that are built over time, and you build that trust and they tell you what's on their mind and really is on their mind. I think a lot of times, especially in early career, I made this mistake a ton. I would sprint towards impact. What can I deliver immediately? How many decks can I make? How many docs can I write? How many insights can I provide? How many products can I launch? And all of those are, important things. They provide impact. They are more measurable for sure. But without building relationships first, I think um, you really miss the ability to build that trust. Think about what people care about, how they communicate, understand what your stakeholders are measured on and what makes them tick. And so I think the ultimate unlock for a product marketer, regardless of any of the tool sets, regardless of anything of the other resources that are out there, ends up being relationships, your ability to connect with people, to communicate, to build trust, and then ultimately translate really complex information across teams. That is the actual skill that we have, right? We need to build the trust of our engineers so that they know and are comfortable giving us the technical information and translating that to a sales team or a marketing team or to the social team or whatever else it is. So my advice to anybody in product marketing is your deliverables matter, but I think your relationships matter more.
Well, thank you so much for ending on such a positive note. It was
Absolutely.
great asking you all my questions. I had fun. Thank you.
I had a blast. Thank you very much for having me. It was great to chat with you.